This is the first of the Discourse Café big debates, and we're tackling one of the most controversial and biggest topics from the offset, which is, of course, the conflict in Israel and Palestine. And we are privileged today to have two guests and speakers here with in-depth knowledge of the situation. We're really happy to have both Marthie and Mohammad here. A very warm welcome to you. I just want to quickly give some background on the speakers. Marthie is a researcher and expert in many fields, but she's working at Stellenbosch University, and she joined the World Council of Churches Ecumenical Accompaniment Program in Palestine and Israel from September to December 2011, where she monitored and reported human rights violations in Israel, and this information is used by the United Nations, the Red Cross, Save the Children, and other foundations. She says on her blog, which is called On Being Human, Palestine, South Africa and Israel, I'm inspired by the dignity and endurance of the people of Palestine, as well as by the courage of those Israelis and so many South Africans and others worldwide who actively work for a just peace for Palestine-Israel. Then Mohammad Sami, who hails from El Farm, I'm not sure if I pronounced that correctly. The original 1948 lands of Palestine is a Palestinian student activist here in South Africa. He's chairperson of the University of the Western Cape's Palestine Solidarity Association, which is also from which the newly formed Stellenbosch University Palestine Solidarity Society, which is run by Stephanie Lee, was formed. Everything he does, writes Stephanie, he does for his country. A quote from him: as many Palestinians are killed, and as much as I feel sad about it, I have come to appreciate life even more. For I feel that every second of my life should be in the service of Palestinians and those oppressed around the world. While I could have been among the dead, the reality is that I am still alive. Standing for justice and freedom for Palestinians shall be my unshakable duty until I either die or see a free Palestine. We are, as I said, very privileged to have two knowledgeable people here today. I hope we'll make use of the opportunity to learn more about the situation, to become informed and form opinions. And just two practical things. Could you please all just fill in the lists that are floating around? And then if you need to get out of the building, someone in Harmony will be able to help you. Rachel there has the card. So thank you very much and enjoy. Marthie, first.
Okay. Let me first say it is so heartwarming and inspiring, and I'm just so happy to be here today at an event where I did not have to mobilize people to come to something, but here we are. I'm also a student, I'm a PhD student, a group of students and interested people who want to talk more about this issue. It is really, really wonderful that this is happening. Quite historic, I think, that we have a group of students who from their own accord want to know more about this topic in Stellenbosch. It is really an historic occasion, and I want to thank you for your initiative in organizing this. My path with Israel and Palestine is not a very long path, but oftentimes is not measured in terms of the length of it, but it can also be measured in terms of the depth of it. And I do regard my journey with Israel and Palestine, and specifically the Palestinian, as a very deep and a very profound one. I think many of you must have heard that people say that this situation is so complex, and then you almost want to give up when you hear that. And that is actually a narrative that is deliberately spread in the world to say this matter is so complex, and there are so many factors that you need to take into account, and then you end up in an endless discussion getting nowhere. So it's a very effective way of cutting you off right here at the knees. I'm sure you've also heard that people say that a balanced approach is necessary. And sure, that sounds very, very reasonable, doesn't it? Because everything has two sides, at least. But that also is not true. Because a balanced approach, when people say that, the underlying presupposition to that is that the two sides carry equal weight and that they should be treated accordingly, which is not the case. No one said, when we were an apartheid state in South Africa, no one said that the balanced approach is necessary. Everyone in the world said there's clearly a wrong and that wrong must be corrected. Okay. So, and I'm sure you have heard also that people say that, I have heard it, I grew up with the notion that the people of Israel are God's chosen people, and that the promised land, which includes Palestine, was given to the Jewish people by God. When people say that, they do not distinguish between the biblical entity and the modern nation state, and people routinely, even well-meaning people do that. There's actually research showing that people who can be gender sensitive, quite liberal in democratic rights of people, socio-economic rights of people and so on, make the exception when it comes to Israel. And it's based on these kinds of myths that, and I want to stress this, which are deliberately spread in the world. And I argue, and I'll tell you a bit more about my background right now, is that when one looks at argues from the perspective of international law, then the situation is actually crystal clear. It is very, very, very clear. But what happens is that international law, in terms of Israel and Palestine, is not applied. Why? The United Nations have said so many times, international law must be applied here, international law must be applied there. I have a whole list of laws. We can get into that later if you want to know what those laws are and what they basically say. But each time the United States of America veto what the International Criminal Court says, or what the International Court of Justice says, or what the United Nations Security Council says. So international law is basically simply not applied in terms of Israel and Palestine. So Israel gets away with murder, with destruction, with wars, with everything. I think Mohammad will be able to tell us more about. So what is really uncanny, and I'm going to quote from a Jewish American. He says, Mark Braverman, he says, what is uncanny and tragic is that in the current discourse, the roles of the combatants are turned upside down. The Jews are portrayed as the victims and the Palestinians as the aggressors. Now, about 3 years ago, this time of the year, I attended a lecture by a Jewish, actually an Orthodox Jewish person from Canada. He's an historian, and it was a talk held at the Bayers Nadir Center for Public Theology. And he then said that not all Jews in the world support Israel. I couldn't believe what I heard, because I was one of those well-meaning people who support gay rights, who definitely support social and economic justice on every level that there is. That night was an eye-opener for me, and I realized that evening that, as I sat there quietly listening to him, that as a post-apartheid South African, because I grew up during the apartheid years. I am, through my ignorance, and therefore also through my silence, I'm actually actively, and through buying into a lot of the myths, and there are many more, I've mentioned some of them, by actively buying into them, I am actually upholding, maintaining, supporting, through my silence, through my action, a system which is, many say, and I agree with that, is worse than we had in South Africa. And just a footnote, when people talk about Israel as an apartheid state, they don't say so in terms of what happened in South Africa. They say so in terms of what international law describes as apartheid, and that the Rome Statute describes as South Africa. But I realized that night that everything that in life that I stand for, all the shifts that I made in myself, coming from that apartheid era to where I am now, it all comes to nothing. Nothing. I have no integrity if I uphold yet another system in another part of the world. So I had been, this was about 4 years ago, sorry, this was about 4 years ago. So a few months later, one of my lecturers and a friend, he's now at KwaZulu-Natal, Clint Lebrun's, told me that he would be going to Palestine, and I said, yes, well, I really want to hear when you are back, you know what you see. So he came back, he showed me some of his photographs, and I saw all these people queuing up early in the morning at the checkpoints, and he described to me the situation and what I saw in his photographs and what I heard from him in a city called Bethlehem, which in my mind is not yet a city, it's a small place, but you know, I have romantic pictures about, as a Christian, about Bethlehem in my mind. And that's altogether not what Bethlehem is right now. It is a city which is walled in, where last year soldiers shot an 18-year-old Palestinian guy who came from friends. He was walking home. He was not armed. He did nothing wrong. They just shot. They first tried to provoke him, and when he did not respond to that, they shot him. That person he still lives, but is retarded and crippled after that. It's just one example of many such things that happen, and that is the real Bethlehem. Yeah, I think Gaza is pretty much in our minds, but what I want to emphasize is even before the recent destruction, and one bomb of Israel can destroy a whole city block, and in the 2008 clash, Israel dropped 100 such bombs. Now this violence that we saw now was much worse. But even before that, the entire infrastructure in terms of education, healthcare, water, sanitation, were in a dire situation because of the ongoing deliberate destruction and the withholding of resources. People talk of Gaza, and I haven't been there, so it would be nice if you could comment on it, but as an open-air prison. And they say that because, well, the Israelis say that they don't occupy Gaza, which is not true. Because if the Palestinians may not use their airspace, if they may not use their water space, and if they may not go out of the country by land without the permission of Israel, then Israel occupies Gaza. So it's an open-air prison. People cannot go anywhere. The thing is, Gaza, because it's so visual, these wars, they are broadcast on television, and we see that. What we don't see is the routinely ongoing destruction in East Jerusalem and in the West Bank. And that is where I monitored human rights violations. When I left here, I thought this would be a marvelous, interesting project. And I would come back and continue with my life here. I had no idea of the depth and the width, the breadth, the extent of the destruction. On a daily basis, my team members and I reported lists of breaches of international law. I'm a little worried about the time, so what Israel does, they confiscate valuable agricultural land. The entire wall that they built between Palestine and Israel is actually not between Palestine and Israel. 85% of it is on Palestinian land. So the International Court of Justice said that the entire wall is illegal and that Israel must dismantle it. What does Israel do? They continue to build the wall. So there's an example of an illegality. And in doing so, this you can clearly see how this wall grabs agricultural land. Now I've sat with a family also in the district of Bethlehem, where their land of 6 generations was simply confiscated. Now, one would think, can't they go to a court and fight this thing? Of course they can go to a court, but it's a military court owned by Israel. So all the people go to the court and they fight their cases, and all of them lost. So then Israel goes ahead. What they do is they come into the village, they cordon it off, so that people like us who are human rights monitors cannot come in. They confiscate the land, and the good land, the agricultural land, is now on the so-called Israeli side of the wall. Now that land is olive trees for Palestinians are like children. You need to nurture a tree, you need to give it water every single day when it is small for a year, and then the process goes on. But an olive tree grows very slowly, and so it was an olive grove. It was not only the source of income, it was the place where the people picnicked. It's a place where people gathered as a family. They are deeply connected to the land. It was just taken away. The family sat there, the children, young children, teenagers, part of the family, and the parents. We were a Swiss school, and 2 South Africans, because I was visiting that team. We had nothing to say. What do you say to these people? You have absolutely nothing to say. So we sat there with them, because we were allowed in at 2 o'clock. Then the Israeli soldiers allowed us in, and we could take photographs and talk to the family and sit with them. So the farmer started to talk to us in the end, and he looked at us, the 2 South Africans, and he said, if things can change for you, then it can change for us. And he added, Inshallah, which means God willing in Arabic. So you can understand that I could not come back to South Africa and walk away from this. I just simply could not. So today, and I'll cut myself short, there's a lot to still say, but let Mohammad talk. Today, I am an advocate, an activist for non-violent resistance, and hopefully there is time for us to talk about what this non-violent resistance consists of, and how people who are interested can play a role, because each of us can play a role in our daily lives without going out of our normal routine. But I could not walk away from it, and what I want to say today is that we as South Africans have a double responsibility, a triple responsibility to stand up for this matter, to familiarize ourselves with what is really going on there, to see through the myths that Zionist Jews and Zionist Christians, the curtains that they pull in front of our eyes. We need to overcome those blind spots that we have, look at the issue, and then speak up. The Palestinians are crying, they are dying in their quest for help.
Hello everyone, thank you for the nice introduction, and let me also thank the organizers, Stephanie, Emily, and everybody that made this gathering possible. I always say that realizing our potential and always standing up for justice really starts with such gatherings and talking about things in an open manner, exchanging point of view. So thank you so much. My talk will be basically reflections about me living in Palestine, having grown up in Palestine. Just exploring my surroundings and looking at life, trying to understand it better, because we're always in a process of understanding our lives better, aren't we? My story starts, or rather the Palestinian story, starts in 1948. A year that witnessed the replacement of one narrative at the expense of another narrative. There you had people that had lived there forever, the indigenous population of Palestine, the Palestinian people. The country was occupied. Israel managed to occupy 78% of Palestine in 1948. It continued until the 1967 because Israel continued expanding. And I'll be just mentioning that briefly because it really takes a number of lectures to talk about the history of Palestine and what happened. And just to briefly mention, but just to put you in the context. In 1967, they felt it wasn't enough that they acquired 78% of Palestine. So they occupied the rest of Palestine, basically 100% of Palestine, putting Gaza under siege and the West Bank under military rule. Now, my story as a person, as a Palestinian, really starts from my childhood and goes as far as me speaking to you now. From the very moment you are born in Palestine, you are immediately, despite your innocence and all of that, you are immediately classified as an Israeli Arab. So, with your innocence, you are being classified really as somebody who is not really an Israeli. Now, as a Palestinian, having gone to school afterwards, first grade, then second grade, and being exposed to a system that forces you to buy into their narrative, that forces you to learn that your forefathers were barbaric, that your forefathers were people who weren't civilized, that your forefathers were people that didn't actually exist in reality, and that we as Palestinians are subhuman, and that we don't deserve to be there, and therefore the fact that we are there as Palestinians in the eyes of Israel, they think that we should be grateful for them allowing us to stay in our very indigenous land. Having progressed through school, being in grade 11, and that's when you get your Israeli ID, identification card. Now, as a youngster, as somebody who's at high school, you are excited, because it's the first official thing that will make you basically a legal person. And just going into the home affairs in Israel and looking at the ID, it triggered many thoughts in my mind. Is that this ID is an Israeli ID, it's a passport, and it just doesn't represent me, doesn't speak to who I am as a Palestinian Arab, as a Palestinian Muslim. We in Palestine are Muslims and Christians. Now, that very moment shaped my life and really helped me and encouraged me to investigate things further. The Israeli education system is a segregated system, so the Jewish students have their own school and the Arab students have their own schools. In that system, in both systems, there is a strategy of indoctrination, brainwashing, which explains things like 93% of the Israeli society, for example, supporting the recent attacks on Gaza, dehumanizing the other, because you're all the time subjected to views and basically ideas that the other is somebody who's not worthy of being labeled as a human being. Now, coming to South Africa, he even helped me widen my understanding even further and look at it even in a much more critical way, and realizing that it's actually worse than what I thought. Because there's this process of normalization, you are just born there, you are normalized, and you just get used to the way of life. Accept your status as a third-class citizen, and accept your status as such, and not having any interest in wanting to have anything better, because you would look at people in the West Bank and Gaza and you think, okay, my situation is slightly better off, so I'd better keep quiet. But coming to South Africa really made me see the similarities between the two conflicts. Well, in fact, they're not like identical necessarily, but there are many similarities. Now, as Palestinians, we are chased by a ghost that is called Israel, everywhere, whether it be in the West Bank, Gaza, the Palestinians who live inside Israel, or the Palestinian refugees who were expelled from their homes in 1948 and 1967, who amount to about 7 million people who are still denied the right to go back to their homes until now as we speak. Now, and it could be things like having a Mossad agent, following you wherever you go. It could be in South Africa, wherever. And if I may ask here, like, if there are any Mossad agents here, please don't stand up. Are you guys all Mossad agents? Anyways, no, seriously, the fact that I'm speaking to you now as a Palestinian and telling you about my story, having lived through apartheid, what I would consider as worse than apartheid even. To Israel, this is worrying. This is worrying because you are exposing the reality there on the ground. You are telling people around the world to stand up for justice, to see things for what they really are, and to call a spade rather than call it democracy. Now, to even put you in the context at a personal level, I'll be given an example about Ihab, who's my friend, who's from Gaza. The recent attack on Gaza has resulted in the death of 2,200 people, about 75% of whom were civilians, helpless civilians who didn't have anything to do with Israel whatsoever. And 500 and about 20 of those killed were children. About 20,000 houses or homes were demolished, either partially damaged or demolished, completely demolished. More than 500,000 Palestinians turned out to be homeless as a result of the recent attack. And Gaza is a place that had already been damaged, bombarded 3 times already. And it had been put under siege since 1967 initially, but the deadlock was actually tightened in 2006 when Hamas won a democratic election. Israel then put Gaza under siege, and they even controlled things as basic as calories. So Israel dictates how much calories you can consume as a Palestinian, what type of water you can drink. Did you know that 90% of the water in Gaza is undrinkable? In many cases, it has led to kidney failures. Did you know that Israel controls the going in of medical supplies, even in cases of war? What I would say war with quotation marks, because it's not really a war, it's just a massacre. And Gaza is a place that is 40 kilometers long and about 10 kilometers wide. And in that very small spot lives about 2 million people. It's the most densely populated area in the world. And it's a flat area. Wherever you go, you see houses, buildings. So wherever you bomb or you drop a bomb, you will definitely kill people. You will definitely inflict damage, and they know it very well. And they know that they will be killing children. And when you target children, you're not only killing people and destroying their houses, but you're also targeting their future, because you know children are the future. It's a process of intimidation to make Palestinians feel intimidated, helpless. They don't want us to resist, to stand up for them. You know, Palestinians have tried non-violent means since 1948 already. And we have tried every single means that you can think of. And it has never worked. It has never worked simply because we really have to look at the root cause of the problem. And the root cause of the problem is the occupation. As a Palestinian, I did not come to Israel. Israel came to me. Israel is only 66 years old. My forefathers have been there for ages. Now, I'm not simply promoting the fact that we're not welcome there. We can simply live all together as equal human beings, holding up or upholding values like justice, freedom, equality for all, one vote, one person, and literally exclude any political ideology and not allow that to divide us between human beings. Now, the problem lies in Zionism. I make a distinction between Zionism and Judaism. Zionism is a political ideology that would suggest that there's a certain ethnic group that should be favored upon another group. And that ethnic group is anybody that, according to the state of Israel, is defined as a Jew. If you are Jewish in the eyes of Israel, then you have the automatic right to go and settle there. And from what it could be, you could be living anywhere, and you don't have to speak Hebrew. You just have to prove that you're Jewish, or proclaim that you are. And they are given incentives to go and settle there. Now, when they go settle there, they don't just go there and grab any piece of land. This comes at the expense of Palestinian land. One example is those living in the West Bank. Under the international law, the West Bank is declared as the Palestinian occupied territories. And yet there you find more than 600,000 Israeli settlers living there, comprising more than 200 settlements. And some settlements are as big as 50,000 people living there. And some of these settlements have big universities in them. You have in the West Bank more than 500 checkpoints to restrict the movement of the Palestinian people. And the list goes on. Now, to go back to Ihab, during the 50-day attack on Gaza, which has resulted in what I just shared with you, Ihab was telling me, can you stand up here? Ihab was telling me he was busy working on an assignment when the attack had just started. And he really found it hard to focus on his assignment and be able to be as productive as he should. Only to see his friend, his best friend, killed in an attack by an Israeli fighter jet. He told me, while this is happening in Gaza, while my neighborhood has been completely wiped out, and the only house that remained in the area is our house, and the fact that our neighbors all came to our house because they had their houses destroyed by Israel, by the fighter jets, by the constant bombardment. I would rather be with my family rather than having to think about them either being alive or dead. I would rather die with them rather than be here and think about the consequences of what might happen next. And that is the situation of the Palestinians. These are the types of thoughts Palestinians engage in on a daily basis. It's a system that breeds all types of negative things, like really discrimination, apartheid, dehumanization, subjugating the other, justifying the killing of children. When you get to the point where you justify the killing of children, then there are no words left to describe the situation. When officials, like back in the day, like Ben-Gurion would say that, I don't see anything immoral in ethnic cleansing, I'm all for it. When Netanyahu, the current prime minister, says, beat him up so repeatedly until they feel it, and until they feel sick and tired of that reality. There's a pattern there that exists from 1948 until now, and it's continuous. And that is the ongoing ethnic cleansing of Palestine. Now, I always say it's very important for us as students, as critical thinkers, and as leaders to really investigate further before we pass any judgment about the situation, especially when you're talking about a victim versus oppressor scenarios, where one word can really shape what happens around the world. We live in a world where everything is controlled by the media, and those who have power would control the media and dictate what supposedly the right narrative is all about. The things that you listen to me saying now, it's not something that you often see on the media or watch. The 1948 narrative, the expulsion of Palestinians, the fact that half of Palestine's population were expelled to the neighboring countries, the fact that half of the villages in Palestine were wiped out, completely wiped out from the face of the earth. The fact that half of the towns were just wiped out. The fact that Tel Aviv University that exists now, one of the most prestigious universities in Israel, where thousands of Israelis graduate, was built on the ruins of the village of Sheikh Mounis. At the time there were more than 30,000 people living there. Now all you see is a university. Sometimes as Palestinians, despite all difficulties that we have to go through to be accepted at Israeli universities, we still, with our commitment and determination and steadfastness, manage to go through the system. Just imagine the feeling of a Palestinian studying at the University of Tel Aviv, knowing that that village, once upon a time, was a Palestinian village. And it could be one of the classes where one family lived and they cherished their memories. And that is basically the story of every Palestinian. I should be reflecting now about what's happening, but every Palestinian will have a story to tell you. I myself, I have relatives in Syria, Lebanon, and I have relatives and friends in Gaza. Myself and Ihab would not have met each other if it wasn't for South Africa. Because we as Palestinians, they were not allowed to communicate with each other. Gaza is declared as a terrorist zone. So Ihab would be a terrorist in the eyes of Israel. And therefore, I'm not allowed to go and visit him. He's not allowed to come and visit me. Same goes for Syria and Lebanon. My relatives who were put under siege in the Yarmouk refugee camp by Bashar al-Assad in Syria, they were starved to death, and we weren't even allowed to get in touch with them or contact them because Syria is seen as an enemy state in the eyes of Israel. And the moment you contact them, then you have terrorist ties or ties with terrorists. So it's really infiltrating in every aspect of your life. And things like also marriage, like if you want to get married to somebody from Gaza or the West Bank. As a Palestinian who lives inside Israel, you really have to make hard choices. You have to either move to Gaza and never come back, or move to the West Bank or never come back, or forget about it. Because that is the policy. The policy and the target or the aim is to create hard conditions in the ground, to make Palestinians eventually leave, get sick and tired of that reality. And this is not something that I just say. Many Israeli officials admitted that, and they're proud of that. They don't shy away from it. You know that the debate outside Israel is whether ethnic cleansing is factual or not. The debate inside Israel, the Israeli society, is whether ethnic cleansing moral or not. So really the debate back home is about morality. How moral is ethnic cleansing? So when you come across a pro-Zionist, for example, on campus, telling you about a factual record and that the ethnic cleansing didn't happen, you can literally quote Israeli leaders admitting that the ethnic cleansing happened. So we have no doubt about that. My question is, what do we do now? We are stuck in this situation. What do we do? That's where our responsibility comes. As moral human beings, as students, as responsible people. And especially, and most importantly, as South Africans. South Africa has this moral image around the world that the rest of the world looks up to you because you have been successful in your struggle against injustice and against oppression. One of the examples that I could share with you is the University of Johannesburg. It was the very first university around the world to cut ties with Israeli institutions. And they have sent a very strong message around the world, influencing many of them, thousands and hundreds of institutions to follow in the same path. It's still in the process, it hasn't accumulated, but it's a step in the right direction. Because we have tried peace talks with Israel for more than 22 years, and it has just been getting worse and worse and worse. And the life of a Palestinian, and the fact that we have lost many casualties, requires us to really take immediate measures. And the least we can do at the moment is to send a very strong message to Israel by boycotting Israel, isolating Israel, let them understand, hit their conscience before it's too late. Before it's too late, what I mean by that, and I'm quoting Israeli officials here in the government, is that if we as Israelis don't stop that, we will lead ourselves to self-destruction. That is Israeli leaders themselves saying that. Now let us join the BDS. Let us be active on campuses and wherever it leads. Here, for example, you have the PSS, Palestinian Solidarity Society. And Stephanie is part of that society. She's the chairperson of that society. It has just been established. And the idea was that to really students, normal students, ordinary students who had ideas, and they decided to transform their ideas into constructive activism, to actually say enough is enough, and that is the least we can do as moral, conscious human beings. As people who believe that injustice some way will affect peace every way. As people who have the responsibility to make sure that whatever happens today should never happen again. Because we in Palestine, in the 21st century, we are the only people that still suffer from colonialism. Colonialism has ended everywhere, except in Palestine. Why? Because Israel is being depicted as a democracy. And I will end with this, with Ilan Pappé, an Israeli historian who was a Zionist. And then at one stage, he, after studying and exploring the situation around him, he decided that Zionism is wrong and we should stand against it. Ilan Pappé said that if you want to call it democracy, that's fine. But you cannot expel half of the population and then have elections. That is exactly what happened. Half of the population were expelled, and then let's have elections. Obviously, there will be a Jewish majority, and obviously you will claim to be the most democratic country in the Middle East. And although to sum up the whole Palestinian story, the Palestinian poet Murid al-Barghouti says very eloquently in Arabic, and it doesn't really have that same very strong message when you translate it into English, but I'll try. He says that, oh God, I know that there is life after death, and I have no problem with that. I know that there is life after death, and I have no problem with that. But God, I sincerely ask you, is there even life before death? And that is the mentality of a Palestinian. Now, despite what Murid Barghouti said, I can assure you that the Palestinian people are courageous people and people who stayed fast. We have been going through this for the last 66 years, and we still believe that it's still possible to get out of this situation. We still have hope, but our hope will be much more meaningful with your support. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marthie. Before we get into questions, Ihab would just like to say something.
Okay, thank you to everyone here. Thank you for everything, for the organization, this one. I'm Ihab from Gaza Strip. I came here last 1.5 years. I was there when the first war, when the second war, the first intifada and the second intifada. I saw everything. I work in the hospital in some X-ray department. I was there for everything. I know Gaza, so how can I identify Gaza Strip? It's 5 main cities and a lot of camps around the cities. It's small camps, big camps. There is no life in it. It's very, 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 how can I say it? It's dirty or difficult life, but the people still survive there, still say we want to live. We want to be Palestinian, on the Palestine, on all the Palestine, from Rafah to Ras al-Naqura, north, from A to Z, from everything. We want to live, we love the life. But in the same way, when the Israeli soldier, when the Israeli government come to us and apartheid our country from 66 years, as Muhammad said, as Dr. said, the olive tree, it's a big thing in our history, in our religion, in everything in our life. The Israeli soldier destroyed the olive tree. It's old more than 1,000, more than older than 66 or 1,000 years. That about the Gaza war, it's 52 days. It was during the Ramadan day and after Ramadan, or Ramadan, it's holy month for Muslim people. Israel start to attack, start to destroy, start to kill. Actually, my family, my father, my mother, my two sisters there, my two brothers there, they moved a lot from our house to another, to more safety cities or more safety area, but unfortunately there is no safety. As my mother said, and my father, anything can move on the street or behind the street or anywhere can destroy it, can bomb it by F-16. What you saw in Jazeera or on TV, social media, Facebook, just 10%. The real story from the real story. The other things they can't upload it on Facebook or on the social media. It's too or extremely big thing. They can't. What can I say about Palestine? Or about Gaza Strip? This is Gaza. This is our life there. When the Hamas was winning in 2006, the Israeli soldier controlled everything. As the doctor saw, as you say, it's big prison. Israel controlled the sea, the sky, the board, the land, everything. There is anything can come in or go off from Gaza. This is our life there, but still survive. Still be or still say we are there. We are on the land, on Gaza Strip, on everything we want to do, to be there. To say to all over the world, we are there. Everything we do it. It's for us, for Palestine, for Gaza, for freedom, for freedom for another country also. This is what I like to say. If anyone ask something about Gaza, about Palestine, say.
Yes, so you can ask questions to any one of them. Yeah, anyone.
Time for questions. I think I'll start then. My question's for any one of you. Mohammad, you said that you say it's a war in quotation marks. It's actually a massacre. Now, my question is, as normal, as a student, someone who maybe claims to be informed, how is it possible that so many of us don't really know that? How is it possible that the media can depict something so wrong?
It really starts with this, I would say, this romantic relationship between the US and Israel. And if you look at the power dynamics around the world, you'd be able to see who's actually supporting Israel and who's not supporting Israel. So really, whatever happens in Israel is really controlled by the media, because the media itself is controlled by those who have power and those who have wealth. And that happens to be in the US, where Israel enjoys most of its support, let's say. Now, talking about war and using the quotation marks, and there is a reason I use the quotation marks, because I don't think it's a war between two equal sides. It's really a relationship of unequal relationships between two different, it's an oppressed kind of relationship, an occupied kind of relationship. And when you oppress people and give them no reason to live for, then obviously these people will resist in any way possible, because they have nothing to lose. And that is the situation in Gaza. I mean, what is it that people in Gaza can aspire to? Just think about it. Put yourself in that context. You are in an open-air prison, and it's even worse than an open-air prison, because at prisons you at least get to eat every day. You are served. You are given water to drink, clean water. You are being taken care of, but you're just being punished by being put in jail. So it's really worse than a prison, because the water is contaminated. The food, the calories are controlled. Medical supplies are cut. So you want to be treated, but you can't. And Israel, on the other hand, is the third most powerful army, not the fourth, and I think it's the fourth, in the world, against helpless, stateless people who think, or who happen to think, that they deserve to have a decent life. Dreams, education, living, food, shelter, water, simple things, basic human rights. That's all we ask for. You know, one example is in the West Bank as well, where you have the Israeli settlements, and on the other side there will be a Palestinian village. While the Palestinian village, they don't have enough water. On the other side, in the Israeli settlement, you find big pools of and really luxurious kind of life on the other side. When in fact, the water comes from the same source, but it's everything is segregated because the Palestinians and these people are Israelis. The roads, they are Israeli-only roads. So for Palestinians and for Israelis, even the plates on the car have different colors. It's a segregated system, and that's why we use the term apartheid. I hope that answers your question.
Can I add to it? Yeah. I just want to say something about law and violence. The international law allows for the oppressed to resist through violence, as long as it is targeted at military targets. Now, unfortunately, there are many examples of where Palestinians also target non-military targets, and that is illegal in terms of international law. However, by no means does the law allow for an oppressor, Israel, to target the oppressed party through violence. So that is totally illegal. And what one should distinguish between the ad hoc incidences of violence from Palestine to Israel, and the systemic, institutionalized, legalized, daily violence from Israel. And that is why this thing is uneven. Israel gets 25% of the United States foreign aid budget. They are the biggest recipient of foreign aid budget from the United States on an annual basis. And then the water thing that you raised, what they actually do, you know, we hear many stories saying that, but Israel is so good with water, and they make the Negev bloom, they make the desert bloom. What they basically do is, there are boreholes that the Palestinians have had for a long time, but now in the West Bank, in the Jordan Valley, for instance, where most of the farms are, the Palestinians are allowed to drill down 100 meters, between 90 and 100 meters. The Israeli settlers who live there illegally, there are between 500 and 600,000 of them, they may drill down hundreds, up to 600 meters down. So what they effectively do is they come and drill holes deep down next to existing water resources, so they suck out all the water. So there's nothing left for the Palestinians to farm with. The Palestinians may not even maintain, they're not even allowed to maintain the infrastructure, and often it is demolished. I've seen that many times.
Mohammed, I would just like to talk about some of the constructive things that students can do to join the international movement. Can you maybe talk about your experience as chairperson of PSA and what you guys achieved in the past week? Past 2 weeks, yeah? The memorandum.
So basically, as students on campus at UWC, we decided to basically get together as students who share similar opinions and views about the issues of justice around the world. So we decided to transform our ideas also into activism, and we started the Palestine Solidarity Association. We had certain objectives. We want to promote awareness and mobilize students on campus to basically make universities a place that is active, because I believe that really university without activism is really meaningless if you think about it. That's the time where you need to be active. What we have done recently at UWC is that we but we submitted a memorandum to the Council of the University to declare Israel as an apartheid colonial state, but also to urge the university to join the BDS movement. And we had received a very positive message from the rector of the university, and now we're waiting on a response from the rector. So I would encourage students here at this very university to engage in similar activities, because again, that's the least we can do. And this is something that is highly appreciated if you can really contribute to something that is meaningful, that not only would contribute to Palestinians and justice and peace-loving people around the world, but also to humanity as a human being. Having said that, I have contributed, to the liberation of a people. It is something that you could even talk to your children and grandchildren about, and something that you can be proud of, having stood up for justice and dignity and moral values. So I would really encourage you, and I really hope that you guys engage in activities that would help those that are oppressed around the world.
I just want to ask a question to both speakers, and that is, do you think that the recent conflict in Gaza was like a turning point for the whole thing in the Middle East? Because I think Sweden is in the process of recognizing Palestine as a state now, and John Kerry also met with President Abbas and so on, and I know there's tension between Barack Obama and President Netanyahu. So do you think that the world just woke up now and woke up to this injustice that takes place on the part of Israel? Is this a turning point? Will things change for the better for Palestine from now?
I would think yes, the momentum is growing. It's not still at the pace we would like to see it at, but we're heading in the right direction. I think obviously Palestine will not be free tomorrow or the day after. It'll take time. How much time? We don't really know. It really depends on our activism as activists, as civil society movements, and how much is it that we can escalate our efforts towards a settlement of the conflict in the context of Palestine and Israel. Now, this can be played out by different factors, the diplomatic factors, the political factors, but for me the most important factor is the civil society movements and that movement or momentum that comes from bottom up, because that's where you can actually create real change around the world, and in this case Palestine. The fact that Sweden and the UK have agreed to recognize Palestine as a state, although I'm very critical of the two-state solution, because it is a solution that is based on ethno-religious basis that says if you are of this type, if you are from this race and you live on this side of the wall, if you are from another race on the other side of the wall, and that is basically a Bantustan, if you can remember the term here from the context of South Africa. Now that needs to change, because it has become more like a religion. You say like, oh, there is no solution but the two-state solution, and therefore we have to believe in it. No, who says that? The reality is such that Palestinians has lost 78% of the historic land. Why should they accept only 22% of what they deem to be a historic, their historic land? Now, there is a solution to that, and the solution is the one-state solution, where Israelis then can say, okay, this is our land, and Palestinians can also say that. Now, how do you achieve that? By promoting that, by emphasizing that. And luckily, from my experience as an activist, and from observing activism around the world, the momentum is already changing. It's shifting from two-state solution and from neutral positions to a one-state solution, thanks to activists and scholars like Ilan Pape, for example, who has been promoting that and has been very vocal about the subject. So yes, I'm very hopeful. I think we're going in the right direction, but there are still certain changes that need to be made, and but from here we can always contribute to exposing Israel, for example, to talking about what's happening to Palestinians, and that in itself is a step in the right direction.
I actually came here to have a more critical engagement discussions, and I'll pose some questions from the other side maybe. In the light of the 6-day war, where Arabic countries actually threatened the Israeli state, and where they preemptively had to strike against those countries, and where the Golgotarian heights are still under UN mandate, and the new movement of the IS, do you think that a one-state solution would not maybe threatening the piece of religion who is actually in the minority in that geographic context? Because Palestinians are by religion are Muslimic, and the IS movement is a Muslimic movement.
Well, Palestinians are both Christians and Muslims. See, I'm not necessarily of the opinion for expelling the Jewish people there. I have nothing against the Jewish people there. What I'm basically promoting is this. We as Muslims, Christians and Jews can live as equal citizens. But Israel doesn't want to see that happen. Because this whole principle is of having an exclusive Jewish society that makes them oppress the other. And the other happens to be the Palestinian. Now, regarding the 1967 war, quotation marks again, interestingly enough, Meko Peled, his father, was an Israeli general who participated in the 1967 war, was one of the main leaders. And he wrote a book speaking about how they planned the 1967 war, trying to make it look like it is the Arab countries that kind of invoked or provoked Israel to react, when in fact it's the other way around. There he details out how Israel led the Arab countries into war. They literally dragged them into war to be able to have the occupation on the ground as a de facto, as a fact on the ground. And then you can use it in the future as an excuse, well, we occupied this because the Arab countries attacked us. Now, I think it's very important to expose such narratives because it's really the wrong narrative, and this narrative is being really promoted around the world, and unfortunately and sadly being accepted by many around the world. And that's why that's where our responsibility as critical thinkers is to look into history and analyze things critically to be able to judge on false and accurate judgment, because that eventually helps us have a better vision for the future and in terms of solutions. I hope that answers your question.
Sorry, can I just say something about the topic of the one-sidedness? I found both the Jewish Board of Deputies and the Israeli Embassy, and they're not prepared anymore to put up speakers against. They've totally withdrawn into their shadow on this topic. They said no, they're not going to let anybody. And I don't know if it was for this event or was it for the other event.
It was for tomorrow.
It was tomorrow's event. So they just said no. Jewish Board of Deputies and the embassy both.
But there's a very urgent hand
No,
at the back.
if you want to, you can respond to that. I can wait. It's fine.
No, I think you answered it very well. We normalize myths, you know, and yeah, one thing that I think should be said is that somehow Arab has become a synonym for terrorist, and Muslim has become a synonym for terrorist. And that's not a fact. It's not based on fact. It's based on fear. It's based on myths. It's very interesting what you mentioned in terms of the Jewish Board of Deputies and the embassy, that they no longer want to put up speakers. The thing is, they are paid. The Jewish Board of Deputies are paid, and there's a Israel media instrument or platform. People are paid to push myths into the public domain, so that we buy the kind of things that ISIS translates to Palestinian, translates to terrorism, that we make those, that we transfer ideas onto one another, whereas they have nothing to do with one another. So it is really important to take note of what the United Nations say, of what the facts are, and to overcome our own prejudices.
Okay, cool. Shukran, Mohammad, for sharing your story. This is actually from Ms. Momberg. From what I heard, you went as a delegate of the South African Council of Churches to.
Yes.
And I think the political, injustices and so on of the Israeli state is quite obvious, and it's difficult to hide that now. But and you spoke about the need for an organic sort of grassroots development of civic activism. But South Africa remains a very religious country, and so 70% or so is Christian. And as the South African Council, and also you've mentioned the misunderstanding between, Palestine being Muslim, and this is now a religious conflict and biblical history, etc. So did the South African Council of Churches take a position on how to sort of, demysticize this religious understanding of the political problem in the Middle East, and what steps are they doing to go to their congregations and sort of make it clear that this is actually beyond religion, this is political, this is immoral, etc.
Thank you. That is a very, very relevant question. Thank you for raising that. They have taken some steps, and I'll mention some now, but I want to say that they haven't taken enough. One of the steps that they took was for South Africa also to participate in this ecumenical program of the World Council of Churches that I participated in. It's a 3-month assignment there. They have made some statements earlier in the year. The thing is that the South African Council of Churches basically, and it was part of the declarations made last week at the reenactment of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission on Faith Communities. The South African Council of Churches actually said, they acknowledged that they fell flat in the past few years. After apartheid was demolished, people thought that the government and the South African Council of Churches would do a lot, and they did not. So they were actually honest about that. But there's a new South African Council of Churches, and they promise lots of good things. However, if one is realistic, those things may not materialize within the next 3 years. It will take time. So basically, the SACC has not been as functional as we would love them to be. But a number of the members, Father Michael Lapsley, Frank Chikane, Reverend Mosntla, and others made public statements that are available on YouTube from the perspective as members of the leadership of SAC earlier in the year. And 2 years ago, December 2012, Dr. Stiaan van der Merwe and I took a group of church leaders, the leader of the Jerry Pillay of the Uniting Presbyterian Church, Zipo Shiva, who is now the chairperson of the SACC, Dr. Graham Hanekom from the Dutch Reformed Church, a number of church leaders. We were a group of 12, including the 2 facilitators. We took them to Israel and Palestine to expose them to what is happening there. My experience with churches in South Africa is extremely frustrating, to give you the bottom line. My own church, the Dutch Reformed Church, is extremely frustrating. Talking about BDS, the Presbyterian Church of the United States, the Methodist Church, the Uniting Church of Canada, many churches in the world actively disinvested from Israel. They went through a process, and it took a number of years, but then they studied material, they engaged in the matter, and they took decisions. In South Africa, we are not yet at the point where churches on an institutional level study, for instance, the Palestine document, which is the official document. You can go and Google it, of the Christian Palestinians. They don't study material. They don't engage on the matter on an institutional level. We do have an increasing number of individual pastors, dominees, priests from the various churches who start to take initiative. That we have. So at least, to quote Mohammed, we are moving in the right direction, but it is, in my opinion, way too slowly. So if there can be from the public sphere, there can be more requests to the SIC, to the Christian community, to say, what is going on here, why don't you speak up? Just one more thing. A large part, probably the largest part of the South African Christian community are Zionists. Many of them closet Zionists. So a Zionist would believe that God is an estate agent. God gave that land to people who are Jewish. Never mind that they grew up in South Africa or United States or Australia or wherever they grew up. Because they're Jewish and they could convert to Judaism at a later stage, they may live there. The land belongs to them, etc. So that also makes it difficult for the SICC to move as an umbrella body because there are different members belonging to the SICC.
Sorry, since there's no one eager to ask, do you think it is because of ignorance that the large majority of Christians in South Africa have that idea of God and Zionism?
Yes.
Because as a Christian myself, having read up on the issues and having friends who stayed in Palestine for 20 years and having spoken to them recently, sort of that changed my whole idea and my whole perspective. And you said your visit there and the talks you attended changed your whole perspective on the issue. Do you think people are closeted Zionists or believe in Zionists because they're ignorant?
Yes, I think ignorance plays a huge and enormous part, and also this confusion between the biblical entity of Israel, and which was very short-lived in the entire history of that part of the world, and the modern nation state, confusion and ignorance. So I think that if we can uncover the myths, then a lot of people's eyes actually, that's my experience as well. People say, I really did not know. Now that I know, it makes a lot of sense. So we have a lot of work to do. You too.
Can I add something? I just want to add something regarding Zionism and the whole thing versus religion. It's interesting to know that Zionism has a secular atheist roots. The founder of Zionism, Theodor Herzl, was an atheist. And you would think for a moment that Zionism is this religious fanatic movement that wants to go there because they are religiously attached to the land. When in fact they're not. It was just when they found themselves in Palestine, they treated the Bible as a historical document, to use it as a justification, as she mentioned, using God as a state agent. As well, like he's somewhere there dictating that if you're from this race, you should live there, and if you're from that race, go live on the other side. You're not welcome. Anyways, and to me that makes a clear distinction between a political ideology and a religious conviction, because we have many Jewish people on board who are supporting the Palestinian issue, who are standing up for justice, who speak like I speak now about Palestine, sometimes even with more passion and with more energy. So it's not really about religion. It's more about oppress a kind of relationship. And when an Israeli soldier shoots a Palestinian, that Israeli soldier doesn't give a thought whether this person is a Muslim or Christian. To them, we are Palestinians, and therefore Palestinians deserve to be treated in this manner. That is basically it.
I have one more practical question. Marthie, I read your letter on your blog that was sent to the Burger about the whole BDS campaign and disinvestment. And what role do you think, for instance, Steffi mentioned to me, Mohammad, that I think it's UCT, that their campaign actually ended up on Al Jazeera, or the
NCA.
Yeah. What role, if Stellenbosch students and if Stephanie's society, if we do something like, because I read in your letter that the security agency that Stellenbosch University actually uses, G4S, is Israeli, is that correct? And that the UK, for instance, was it already pulled out of all the investments in that? Bill Gates pulled out, yeah, yes. So what kind of role, with all of that in mind, could we as students, if we manage to mobilize, what can we do? What can we do?
Okay, let me just swiftly comment on BDS and what it is. So BDS stands for Boycott, Divestment and Sanctions. And that's a movement that started 10 years ago, and the call was made by Palestinians living in Palestine, inspired by the successful experience in South Africa. Because it has proven to be successful, where countries around the world and states, in accordance and in conjunction with those activists that working from within, managed to create this pressure, a formidable force against the apartheid regime in South Africa, leading to its demise at the end. And here we're not talking about really like necessarily the dismantlement of people, but rather the system itself. It has to go, because it breeds violence and discrimination. Anyways, to come back to your question, so keeping that in mind, and that this example has been successful, we have a good reason to believe that this could work out. Because at the end of the day, that's the least we can do as people who are living far away. Now, as students, having achieved even small victories at campus, that will echo around the world and influence others to do the same thing, to basically increase the momentum around the world and really step up our mobilization, to see that happening sooner than later. That is the whole basically sense of activism and being involved, actively involved, and not just superficially, because it really requires determination, consistency, and belief, firm belief that what we do now will result in something. We might not necessarily see the results of our actions now, but we can already start to smell, the fruits of such actions. And there are many ways that you can really be engaged in BDS. You could really follow in the path of trying to get your university here. So maybe you can submit a memorandum to your university in a much more diplomatic language in the context of this university, because I'm sure for reasons that you know, because it can be a sensitive matter. But I believe it's worth trying. And if we don't try, we will never know whether it will succeed or not. And if it doesn't succeed, then it's a sign for us, it's a motivation for us, that we should step up our mobilization and try to even think of different ways to achieve such ends.
Can I say some practical things? Don't buy Dead Sea products, because the Dead Sea is, those products are don't support products that come from Israel. That's basically what BDS says. And why there is a national campaign, a boycott campaign against Woolworths at the moment, is Woolworths says it is an ethical company. So, and Woolworths stocks a very small percentage of its produce comes from Israel. But we are asking Woolworths to not stock, to really be an ethical business, as they say they are, and to stock no produce from Israel. And therefore there is this national boycott of Woolworths, and it is in connection with that I wrote a letter to Die Burger, because Die Burger calls it a Muslim boycott of Woolworths, and I wrote to say it's not a Muslim boycott but a national boycott, and Christians and Jews and others who share this cause participate in it. So the principle is not to buy, in general, is not to buy products from Israel. You can just read it. But we believe to make BDS more targeted. We move from business to business. So if we say that don't buy anything from Woolworths at the moment, it doesn't mean that all the other businesses are fine, because basically everyone stocks produce from Israel. We are just targeting one business. In South Africa, we've already had the success with the University of Johannesburg, and I want to emphasize it was basically activists who worked with the University Council. So the University Council did not make that move out of their own accord. And Karsten's Farms, who produces dates, it's huge farms in the northern part of the country. They stopped, because of pressure by BDS, they stopped exporting their dates to Israel, who packaged it to sell it in Europe and in other places. So we've had some successes in South Africa, and the current attention is on the G4S security company. Bill Gates, yes, disinvested everything he had used to have in G4S. So he put the example there, and Stellenbosch makes use of the G4S security company, and the other one is Woolworths, the Woolworths campaign. So that's why I say that even without, going out of, doing much else but your normal life, you can actually make a contribution.
I'd just like to say something for 10 seconds. So we've started the Palestine Solidarity Society. We will be an official society on Monday, but we're a movement now. But our goals is exactly what we discussed today: constructive methods of joining the international movement. So one, it would be to deliver a memorandum to the university by next year. Second, it would be to join the active boycott of Woolworths. Thirdly, it would be to get G4S expelled, but get the employees employed again by another security company, hopefully a local security company, because there's no reason why we should use an Israeli company where we can use local companies to employ our people. And then, of course, to spread awareness about the real facts about the issue. So those are our 4 main goals. And if you'd like to be involved, you can come speak to me afterwards. I started a committee, and we have an executive, so we're already busy with our campaigning now to prepare for next year.
Thank you. We're going to finish off I think we've all gotten a lot to think about. Thank you very much, Mohammad and Marthie. Yeah, whether it is through, whether you only just as myself became more informed this afternoon, or already informed yourself beforehand, and if you're ready to take a stand, I think we can all very much benefit from what we heard today. Thank you so much. I'd like to present to you just a certificate saying that you are now honorary members of the Frederick Zyl-Slabbert Leadership Institute.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I forgot to say at the beginning, but if you'd like to receive Marthie's newsletter, for instance, and stay updated, you can first check on a blog. I think it's Marthie Momberg blog. Or you can just on the list where you wrote your name indicate, and I'll send your email address on. So thank you again. Thank you, Stephanie, for your help and contribution. And please help us out to some more snacks at the back there.